to actually pay people less?
Alistair Scott.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'd just like to reflect on the last speaker's contribution regarding Masala Restaurant and his $2 an hour issue. That was an employer-employee relationship, and that was an abusive employer, and that employer should be punished. There's no one disagreeing with that. There is no one disagreeing with that. Now, if that same employer had these guys on a contract, that would make no difference. The employer will still have an employer-employee relationship with those people, and they would still be breaking the law. So we all agree that these, to quote Mr Parker, the tow rags, they're the guys that we want to make sure don't operate. We all agree on that. But this is not the solution to that problem. The solution is to give labour inspectors more resource, which is what the Minister has given in the last budget, to make sure that those employer-employee relationships that are out there, that are covered or disguised, if you like, by a contract, are not a contract at all. So let's be clear, there is an employer-employee relationships that are disguised as contracts, and that is unacceptable. This is not the way to solve that problem. In fact, this does confuse the things. So let's look at the SOPs that, because I was looking at the original list, and then we find that the pamphlet guys, the most vulnerable. These are the guys that were sort of kicked this whole thing off. The guys that took a long time to deliver pamphlets because they wanted a social outing. They were definitely, at the end of the day, if you added up the hours that they took at delivering those pamphlets, they were certainly getting paid less than the minimum wage. They were certainly getting less than the minimum wage. But they were happy with it because they used it as a social occasion, and they were slow. They were slow. A young fella on a bike, he would earn more than the minimum wage delivering the same pamphlets. Now, the guy who wanted the pamphlets delivered, he didn't give a toss who delivered those pamphlets. He didn't care who delivered those pamphlets. So he was only concerned about those pamphlets being delivered on time and at the right price. Now, it just seems bizarre to me that those people who kicked this bill off are excluded from the protection that this bill is designed to protect. The most vulnerable, according to some, are excluded. They're not protected, all because of Mr Tabato's contribution earlier, or the need to get New Zealand's support. That was their condition of support for this bill. Disgraceful, disgraceful, allowing the most vulnerable to be paid less than the minimum wage for your political gain. And you've put Mr Parker, who has all the right intentions, confused. So unfortunately for Mr Parker, that group of people have been are not protected in the bill proposed by Mr Parker. That is a disgrace. Now, the other thing that was interesting was Mr Lees-Galloway quite rightly pointing out that if an agreed time was agreed to and an hourly rate was agreed to, then there was no, that was essentially a contract. That's what I would call that, a contract. He would call it some sort of quasi-contract employment based on the time. Now, if the person went overtime, there was no recourse for that person to claim extra. So I don't see any improvement in the bill, because this is just what a contract is. It's a fixed price for a job to be done, and if it doesn't matter what rate you agree. It could be $50 an hour, but if you limit the time, then the total amount X times Y equals Z. It doesn't matter if Y and Z are around the same way. It still equals Z, doesn't it? So you're just playing with numbers, whether it's a high hourly rate in a short time or a low hourly rate in a high period of time. The total is the same, and that is of all concern. So I'm pleased to see that Mr Lees-Galloway appreciates the certainty that a contract gives a builder or a customer, if you like. Now, the other exclusion, the other group of people that are excluded now under these SOPs are those that are employed from multiple sources. And the courier driver was used as an example. So here we are. That's the third line down, courier services.
Julian Genter.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'd like to congratulate the Honourable